How's it going, PD team? I've got a special side quest video for you guys today where we're going to be creating two types of shatter effects for our projects. The first one is this animated particle system shatter where you use it to fill up space. The second one we're going to be creating is one that is not animated that you can screenshot and make into Photoshop brushes for creating some shatter effects inside of your Photoshop documents. I've got an example that I'll be showing you. So within Cinema 4D, we've got the deformers list, which is found here. And in it are two different types of explosion effects. I found that the explosion deformer is great for animated shatter particles, and the explosion effects is great for creating still particles that we can use to make Photoshop brushes. So with that being said, let's dive in and see how it's made. Okay, so here I am in a blank project. What we're going to do is we're going to go to our orthographic front view. So middle click, and I'm going to go to the spline tool, but I'm going to use the sketch tool for this. I'm just going to take my mouse and draw some squiggles like so. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to loft it. So if I hold command click, now if it disappears, it's because the sketch did not make a complete loop. So what you need to do is go to object and say close spline, and then it will fill in for you. Now, what we need to do is we need to convert this. So I'm going to right click and say current state of object, call this shatter. You can also get rid of all of our selection paths here. Okay, so here's our base. We've just right-clicked on it and converted it to a shape. Then what we're going to do is we're going to come in here to the Polygon tool, make one selection. So go to my move tool, select one, command A, select all of them, go to mesh, add, subdivide, and then we get this. Now, if you find your particle shatters are too small, you can subdivide it again subsequently and keep shattering it until you get the right size that you want. It will double up each time you subdivide how many particles. So I have a fix for that I'll show you how to do next. So here's our shape here. We're going to go to our deformers list. We'll start off with the animated particle system first to fill in space. So I'll just hold shift and we'll add it inside of the shatter. And then what we can do is we can just do strength and we can turn off our original here, and somewhere around 30% is good. So if you've got a larger space, you can always go out further. And you can see as I do this, they scale. So if you don't want them to scale, you just set it to 1 and then they just go out. Okay, so somewhere around 30%. Your project size and environment will depend on how big it is, but let's just go right here. I'm going to go ahead and hit play. And now we have some angle that we can adjust to get them to twist a little bit more. And then this is all we're going to use for this effect. Now to get them to animate, what we need to do is we need to make something that will make it move. And what we can do is we can go into our effectors for our cloners here, and you can see we have one called random. So I'm going to hold shift. It adds it to the group and we need to change the order. So what it's going to do is it's going to explode and then we're going to randomize the position. So I'll leave everything by default, and then I'm going to go to my deformer and go to Polygon, and there's no animation because we need to go to the effector, and we're going to then just change it to noise. You're going to see we get kind of a ridiculous gelatinous movement happening. So what we'll do is we'll leave the speed for now, but I'm going to change the scale down to 1 so that the noise that's being attributed to it is smaller, so they all move independently from each other. If you have it rather big, you'll see they kind of move in a group. So if that's a look you want, you can do that. I want them all kind of floating around, and then we can change our size, our speed to 5. And now you can see they're moving around. And then this value, you can just change to be slower so they feel like they're kind of just floating like that. I'm going to leave it faster so you can see it moving. So there you go. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our render settings here. We're going to change this to standard, double click in the material manager and add here. And then I'm just going to take my material and just bring the luminance. And there you go. So there's our animated particle system of shattered materials. And you can always adjust the strength here to get them tighter or further spaced apart like that. So now it feels like there's less, it's just over a bigger distance. And there you go. So there's the animated. So I'll call this anim. So what's great about this is you can use it to fill up spaces between titles. So you can see you get this great effect when the camera moves through it, and you can place these throughout your scene. So if you're flying from one title to the next, you get a sense of depth and parallax that occurs. So it's great for filling up space where maybe you have some action kind of titles, that kind of thing, and you need floating shards of glass or whatever, whatever material you choose. It's up to you. And of course, you can also add a thicken modifier to give these some thickness if you wanted to do shattered glass and so on. So I'm going to stop this and let's go ahead and make the other brush material. So I'm going to come in here to the loft. I'll just take this actually and just duplicate it. I'll call this brush, delete these. We don't need them, and we're back to square one. And then for this one, we're going to use the explosion effects. So I'm going to hold shift while it's selected. It adds it to the group, and then we can just move this out to animate it. Your shapes will appear like really thick and far away. So what I can do is I can come in here to the cluster and bring this down to 0 so they're flat. And then what I like doing is I like bringing the minimum polygons down to 1 so they're small pieces, and then we'll get a max polygon group for unique shapes like this, where you have multiple polygons kind of making up a shard. And I kind of max out these values to kind of twist them. Now you'll notice they're all on a kind of a single plane. So they're kind of flat right here. You can see they're facing one direction, facing forward. So we can go to gravity, opacity, we can turn that down to 0. And then the rotation, we can speed this up, add variation, crank this up to like 500. So now if I go to the side, but you can also see we're not getting a circular explosion. It's kind of going flat on the depth. So what we can do is we can go to the special and we can add twist. And I like just putting this to 500 and then changing it to variation. And what that does is that's going to twist these into a better circular shape. And now you have a slider here in the object here that you can bring in if you want them closer together. And you can see as I do the explosion amount, they kind of twist. So I'll go somewhere around here where they're kind of close together for my Photoshop brush. And that feels good. So I'm going to now turn off by just doing the traffic lights, double clicking, holding Alt, will turn them both off at the same time. And now what I can do is I can just center this up how I like it. And if I want a different brush, I can just rotate like this. I can do any angle that I want and zoom in if I want bigger shards. And you'll get completely different looks by just moving the camera around and rotating. So I'm going to stick with something like this. This feels good. And I want to make a brush. So I'm going to do Control R or Command R. And here's our render. And then what I can do is I can go to a screen recording utility. I'm going to use Clipper because I'm on a PC. Click this, and then we can screen capture our render. And for Photoshop brushes, you don't want too big of renders, screenshots. Somewhere around 1800, 2000 pixels is kind of the max that you want to make a Photoshop brush. They just get too slow to work with if they are otherwise. Then we'll just go here and say copy. So let's go over to Photoshop. Okay, we've copied our selection from the Clipper tool. So it's in our clipboard. So if I do Command or Control N, you can see it's automatically selecting from the clipboard the document size. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And I don't need this background, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to just paste my copy clipboard, Control V. We can then delete the background. And then what I like doing is I like squaring off the document. So I'm going to go to Image, Canvas Size, and you can see this is set to 1800, and I'll set this height to 1800 so it's square. It's going to trim a couple pixels, not a big deal. And then I can add a background fill of black like so. Come in here and then just merge visible so we have a black background. And then what I'll do is I'm going to go to my brush tool and go up to the top here where it has the hard round, give it a reasonable size. And I'm going to just paint the shadows away from the edges to make a more circular brush. And you don't have to spend a lot of time doing this. And I like getting rid of some of the bigger ones as well. And there we go. So that looks pretty good. You can kind of brush out some of the bigger pieces if you want, like so. So there's our brush. So the first step to get this to actually be a brush is what we need to do is we need to invert the value. So I'm going to do Control I to invert or Command I, and the black areas are going to be solid. It's the inverse of how a mask works. It's really weird. It's not intuitive, but you just have to remember you need to work on black objects on a white background for the stamping to work. And then what we need to do is we want to select the whole document. So I'm going to do Command A or Control A. That makes a marquee selection around the document. And this is what's going to be defined as a brush. So to make it a brush, we'll go to Edit. 3/4 the way down, you'll see Define Brush Preset. And we'll call this Shatter 05 because I've made a couple already. And then we'll go to our brushes here. And you can see here it is. And I've got a folder already created. So to create a folder, you just click this folder, give it a name. And then it'll always place it below your folder groups. So you'll just open it up and drag it in order like so. Then what I like doing on the preset is I like going to shape dynamics, and I like doing a little bit of size jitter so they're not perfect. And then I'll bring up angle jitter to complete randomness. And then I'll give it a little bit of skewing as well, because these doesn't matter if they're skewed. And then I'm going to do flip X and flip Y, and that will jitter that shape. So now if I come in here, make a background here, and then I can scale this down by using the open bracket, and I can paint this, and you can see we can now paint with these shattered effects. So pretty cool effect, and you can create a whole bunch. I've made different sizes. So like this one here you can see is bigger shatters, and I just basically zoomed in the camera before rendering. And you can see we have bigger polygons in the shot. And then this one has micro polygons. So I have different sizes going on. And this is all based off of one shatter where you just rotate the camera, hit render, Command R, and then screen grab it, copy it, paste it in a document, square it off, invert it, convert to brush. So it's an actual simple process. You can bang out 20 of these in just a few minutes once you get the pipeline going. And then here's a document that I created, kind of just showing off the extreme example. Now this isn't like a properly designed document. It's just showing you what you can do with it. You can see here where it looks like it's cloned, I'm using the stamp tool. So if I make a new layer and I go to my stamp tool, you can sample parts of your character or your person and then paint them like that. And you can see it's duplicating like that. Then for these type treatments, I basically just did a clipping mask and then sampled the color and painted over it and then clipped it. You can also use it in masks. So you can see if I solo this one here, you can see I drew a marquee mask on this shape. And then I took in the mask, the shatter brush, and just painted like this. And you can see I just did the opposite. So if I want more or less, so if you want to add or subtract. So that's it for creating a Photoshop brush. Just remember that you want to invert your values. So it's black on white. That's it for creating a shatter effect that can be used to fill up spaces in your environments and also creating Photoshop brushes. If you come up with a new use for this effect, creating the explosion effect or the explosion modifier for particles, if there's some other use that you come up with, post in the comments section. I'd love to hear your input. I hope you found this useful. Thanks so much. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on more content. Thanks for your support.